You move deeper into the archive, guided more by instinct than light. The lantern circle grows smaller behind you until the shadows start to carry the room. Dust curls in the air like incense smoke, shimmering when your breath stirs it. Somewhere in the distance, a door sighs open, or maybe just the old wood settling. Either way, you follow the sound. The scroll feels heavier in your hand now, as if the ink itself doesn't want to be far from its resting place. At the far end of the corridor, a narrow staircase descends. It's the kind of stair that looks like it's been waiting centuries to collapse, each stone worn to a shallow curve. You run your fingers along the wall for balance and feel faint carvings beneath the grime, symbols shaped like eyes, spirals, and one that looks unsettlingly like an open mouth. You joke to yourself, "Great, even the wallpaper's watching me," but your voice comes out quieter than you expected. The air thickens with the scent of wax and parchment. When you reach the bottom, the space opens into a low-ceilinged room filled with shelves, chests, and rolled vellum tubes bundled in twine. A single desk sits at the center, covered with papers and a cracked magnifying lens. A brass lamp hangs above, its flame long extinguished but the glass still faintly warm, as if someone had been here not long ago. You rest the scroll on the desk and glance around. That's when you see it. A small door in the corner, half hidden behind a curtain of hanging maps. You push the fabric aside, expecting a storage closet. Instead, the hinges groan open to reveal a cramped chamber, barely large enough for one person. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, but unlike the archive's main collection, these scrolls are unlabeled, their edges scorched. On the floor lies a broken clay seal marked with a symbol, 3 interlocked triangles. You kneel to examine it. The seal looks ancient but strangely intact, as if only recently cracked. And beneath it, a folded sheet of parchment. You hesitate, then unfold it carefully. Written in faded Aramaic, the first line reads, "To any who find this, beware the council's silence. You fälla slå skillkräll up your spine." The phrasing is too direct, too human. Not the formal tone of scribes, but the warning of someone desperate. You whisper the words again, and the sound seems to echo differently, as if absorbed by the walls. Mainstream fact, there really were councils that debated what belonged in the Bible. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, for instance, and later gatherings in Hippo and Carthage. But despite popular myth, they didn't sit in dark chambers deciding which gospels to erase like villains in a conspiracy movie. Their work was bureaucratic, methodical, mostly about consistency of doctrine. Still, French scholars argue that the margins of those decisions, the texts labeled unfit for reading, held ideas too wild, too equal, too dangerous for their time. You imagine one of those scholars now, the you of centuries past, sealing his own translations behind this wall. Maybe he'd realized the council's version of God was tidier than truth allowed. Maybe he'd found something that didn't fit, something like the scroll now glowing faintly under your lamplight. You set the sealed note aside and study the tiny chamber. There's a small window cut near the ceiling, no bigger than your hand. The moonlight through it touches only one shelf, where a single book rests upright amid the scrolls. Its leather cover is cracked, stamped with faded Latin, Commentarius Lucis, the commentary of light. You can't help but grin. The dramatic naming conventions of ancient theologians never disappoint. You open it, careful not to break the binding. The pages are thin and stiff, the ink browned with age. Inside, margin notes cover nearly every inch, different hands, different centuries of anxious debate layered together. The main text seems to be an analysis of Genesis, but halfway through, the tone shifts. It begins referencing a voice of ceilings and the question before the light. Those phrases ring familiar now, you saw them in the scroll. You mutter, so this wasn't a one-off. The forgotten chapter wasn't just rumor, it had commentators, readers, interpreters. That means it existed long enough to be studied. You feel a spark of triumph, the kind that makes your exhaustion evaporate. The next page holds a strange passage. The lost prophet spoke not of salvation but remembrance. He warned that when silence is broken without listening, creation unravels anew. You mute the words, half dreaming them. It feels oddly relevant to every social media comment section ever, but you resist the urge to laugh. Beneath the joke, the thought lingers: how often humanity speaks louder than it listens? Maybe that's the true meaning of the line. You notice a smaller handwriting below, probably from a later scholar. The church denied his name, yet his disciples called him Elior. You whisper it softly. Elior. The sound carries warmth, almost melody. The name doesn't appear anywhere in canonical texts, though some apocryphal scrolls mention similar figures. Half prophets, half poets, men and women who drifted between myth and message. Historians still argue whether such characters were real people or symbolic composites used to voice unsanctioned ideas. You close the book halfway and glance at the door. The air feels heavier now, but not hostile, just dense, like it's thick with unsaid things. The flame in your lamp flickers ons, twisted, ten steades again. You take that as permission to continue. In the back of the little room sits a locked chest, iron-bound and covered in dust. You test the latch, rusted but loose enough to pry open with a careful push. Inside, instead of treasure or scrolls, lies a pile of fragments, torn pages, some half-burned, others smeared with soot. One bears a single legible line: "He who dreams the light becomes its echo." You smile faintly. It's poetic, sure, but also strangely scientific. Echoes, reflections of energy, imply reciprocity. Maybe this prophet wasn't preaching divinity in the usual sense, but resonance, that humans reflect the divine in sound, not shape. The idea is as old as the Vedas, as young as every echo bouncing through an empty hall. You catch yourself mumbling, "Hey, who dreams the light?" over and over. The phrase settles in your chest like a hum. You remember reading about monks who used chant as meditation, believing the vibration of sound could align the soul with creation. Maybe Elior was part of that lineage, a forgotten mystic whose message blurred the line between physics and faith. You chuckle softly. If you ever titled a podcast episode like that, the algorithm would definitely bury it. Among the fragments, you find a small square of vellum different from the rest. It's thicker, smoother, and faintly scented of resin. Etched into its surface is a map, not of geography, but of text. Circles connect to lines, lines to words, words to nothingness. At the center sits one phrase repeated in tiny script: "Remember the quiet between breaths." You don't realize you've stopped breathing until the words pull you back. You inhale slowly, and for the briefest moment, the room seems to exhale with you. It's ridiculous, you tell yourself, a trick of fatigue and imagination, but you feel it. The faint synchronization of breath and space. Maybe that's what Elia meant by remembrance. You gather the scroll, the vellum map, and the note warning of the council's silence. Together, they feel like puzzle pieces from a story that refused to die. You can sense its heartbeat growing stronger now, echoing up through the old stone floor. As you stand to leave, you glance once more at the hidden room. The moonlight shifts, sliding over the words "Commentaries Lucas." You whisper, "I'll be back." The lamp crackles softly in reply, just the wick adjusting, you tell yourself. Just that. Climbing back up the stairs, you feel each step like a pulse beneath your feet. The scroll presses against your chest where you've tucked it for safety. You think of Elia, the blind prophet who saw with his heart, who warned against breaking silence without listening. You wonder if, by reading his words, you've already broken that rule. Halfway up, you pause to rest your hand against the wall. The carvings there, eyes, spirals, mouths, seem clearer now in the lamplight. They aren't random. They tell a sequence: an open eye, a spiral inward, a closed mouth. See, understand, keep silent. You smile at the irony. You've done the first two and the third? You're not sure you can. At the top of the stairwell, you look back into the darkness below. For a moment, you imagine Elior sitting somewhere down terror still, humming the Rachmaflight, whispering his verses into the pageant dark. The forgotten chapter isn't gone. It's just waiting for a voice that remembers how to listen. You reach the upper hall again, breath shallow, the scroll pressed tight to your chest. The night feels thicker now, like the air itself is wary of what you're carrying. You move toward the nearest table, spreading out the fragments you found, the vellum map, the scribbled warning, the trembling lines of the lost text. Somewhere in the distance thunder murmurs again, echoing through the stone like a low heartbeat. It feels as if the storm itself is listening. Is it letting your pulse slow and unroll the parchment a little farther? The ink glimmers like oil under the lamplight. Another passage unfolds, smoother handwriting this time, almost elegant, and the voice that spoke was not the Lord of Fire but the breath of memory. He said unto those who dreamed, remember the silence between creation and command. You whisper it aloud, the syllables heavy and melodic, the kind of line that feels less written and more remembered. A faint sound behind you makes you glance over your shoulder, just the wind brushing through the cracked window panes. You chuckle quietly. If this were a movie, you murmur, that's the part where the ghost librarian shows up with a moral lesson. Still, you pull the chair closer to the table. The humor keeps the nerves from taking over. Historians still argue whether early mystics like the Essenes believed divine revelation could arrive through dream or trance, bypassing written scripture entirely. Some of their recovered texts, like fragments from the Dead Sea caves, mention prophets who spoke not from vision, but from echo. You think of that as you trace the next line of the scroll. The prophet who listened wrote not what he saw, but what the silence told him. It's uncanny, almost like Elior was describing the very process of this rediscovery. You flip the vellum map over. On the back, faint pencil markings form what looks like coordinates. No modern numbers, but letter pairs in ancient Greek. You grab your phone again, using its camera to snap a picture. A translation app stutters, but catches enough to form a phrase, room of the listener. You lean back in the chair, exhaling slowly. The Scholas attic. That must be what the coordinates refer to. Maybe this isn't just metaphorical. Maybe the listener's room actually exists somewhere above or below this archive, a space built for hearing what wasn't meant to be spoken. You picture it now, a narrow chamber filled with wax tablets, feathers, ink pots, maybe even sound experiments like early resonance bowls. One mainstream fact bubbles up from memory. Ancient Jewish mystics sometimes practiced what was called Merkaba meditation, visualizing ascension through celestial spheres by controlling breath and vibration. Some of their manuals even listed sounds to utter in specific sequences, believed to open the ears of the soul. You wonder if this lost prophet Elior belonged to that same mystical branch, or if he predated them entirely. You return to the parchment. The next passage is fragmented, the lower half torn away. Still, you can make out the upper lines, and the voice said unto me, speak not to rule, but to remind. For even the gods forget. You whisper, even the gods forget, and shake your head softly. The phrase sounds like something that could get a man exiled or executed in any ancient temple. The courage to write it down felt absurd, almost suicidal. Yet here it is, centuries later, whispering its quiet defiance through layers of time and translation. You feel the weight of that realization sink in. Someone believed this enough to risk everything. Someone thought forgetting was the greatest sin of all. A sound interrupts your thoughts, the faintest creak of footsteps above you. You freeze. Maybe another researcher? But the archive's lights were off when you arrived and the entry door was bolted. You turn down the lantern and listen. The steps move slowly, deliberately. 10 seconds. You whisper, hello. No answer. Only the hum of the storm. You half smile. Cool. Haunted attic. Classic. You stand anyway, curiosity outrunning common sense. You tuck the scroll into your bag, grab the lamp and climb the narrow wooden stair that leads upward. The attic door at the top is half rotten, but the lock gives easily. A rush of Stahle grates you down and cold like a forgotten Brit. You rise the lantern. Shelves line the walls here too, but these are different, smaller, more chaotic, stuffed with loose notes, ink bottles, and strange instruments. One looks like an early phonograph, but carved entirely from wood. Another resembles a stringed bowl with tuning pegs, designed to hum rather than play melody. You touch its rim and it vibrates faintly at your skin's warmth. Rum of the listener, you whisper. You set the lantern on a stool and scan the nearest wall. Symbols crowd the plaster, concentric circles, Hebrew letters, geometric grids. At the center sits a phrase scratched in Latin, Audi vocem quae non sonate. Hear the voice that does not sound. Your throat tightens. This has to be the room. You remember the vellum map's warning, keep the ink alive. Maybe it didn't just mean preservation. Maybe it meant reactivation. You unroll the scroll again, laying it on a flat stone slab in the middle of the attic. The air here feels denser, as if it's holding its own breath. You begin reading from where you left off. The words seem to shimmer faintly, the ink reacting to the temperature or maybe to your voice itself. And the prophet said, I heard between the notes of thunder a name too vast for letters. When I spoke it, silence wept. You read it slowly, the cadence hypnotic. The wooden bowl on the table gives a soft hum, resonating to your voice. You stop. The hum stops. You whisper again. The hum returns, faint but distinct. You laugh softly, half spooked, half delighted. Okay, Elio, you murmur, if this is your version of a podcast, I'm listening. Historians still argue whether so-called resonant chambers in ancient temples were intentionally built for acoustics. Some think the echo effects were engineered to create the illusion of divine voices. But hearing it firsthand, you can understand how myth begins. The room seems to breathe with you. You lower your voice, letting each syllable draw out. The hum deepens, echoing through the rafters. It feels like standing inside a giant chest, hearing the slow exhale of something enormous. Antique another bird speaks the next line, and the silence become as light, and the light as memory, and the memory as flesh. The hum rises higher, then stops abruptly, as if the air itself swallowed it. For a heartbeat you hear nothing. Then a whisper, not from your mouth, not from the wind, but from everywhere at once. Remember me? You freeze, lamp trembling in your hand. The voice is soft, genderless, impossibly near. You turn, scanning the corners, but there's only dust and old wood. You swallow hard. Okay, you say quietly, that's new. Maybe you imagined it. Maybe you're exhausted. Still, the instinct to reply hits before logic can intervene. I remember, you whisper. The silence settles again, but this time it feels warm. Comforting almost. Like the space between a heartbeat and the next. You exhale shakily, half laughing. Guess the customer service line for lost profits is still active. You pack the scroll carefully, making sure the ink doesn't smear. The attic feels different now, less haunted, more awake. You know you'll come back to this place, not just to translate, but to listen again. As you descend the stairs, you feel the echo of that whisper still circling in your chest. Maybe the voice was memory, or maybe memory was the voice. Either way, you can't shake the thought that the Lost Prophet's message isn't about theology at all. It's about the art of remembering what silence sounds like. You reach the main floor again, lamplight swaying over the shelves. Outside, rain begins to fall, soft and rhythmic. Each drop against the window sounds almost like a syllable, a code repeating the same word. You tilt your head and smile faintly. Maybe it's just your imagination, but it almost sounds like Elia.